It was an interesting time for women's running. There, of course, were a lot of inequities at the time. They had to fight blatant discrimination, misunderstanding, sexism, and, just being told, no, you can't do this.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Set the Pace, the official podcast of New York Roadrunners presented by Peloton. I'm your host, Rob Similcare, the CEO of New York Roadrunners. My co-host, Peloton instructor Bex Gentry, is out of town this week. Well, you've probably heard us talk about this big year we're having at New York Roadrunners this year, the 50th anniversary of the five-borough New York City Marathon. We're celebrating it all year long, and we took a big step forward in that celebration this week. 50 years ago, 5 people really had the audacious idea to take the New York City Marathon out of Central Park and those laps that they were running in the early years of the marathon and run it through all 5 boroughs for the very first time. Now, as we begin to celebrate that 50th anniversary of the five-borough marathon, we're telling their story. Yesterday, we launched a new campaign called the Trailblazers. Most of us have run their course without ever even knowing their names. Ted Corbett, George Hirsch, Fred Lebow, George Spitz, and Percy Sutton. They were the visionaries, the builders, the connectors, and the believers that really brought the idea of a five-borough New York City Marathon to life. They each played a unique role in making this vision a reality, and it turns out that they turned this impossible idea of a five-borough marathon running through the streets of the city into a global tradition and a global event that now brings people from all over the world to New York City once a year, and that has been emulated in major cities all around the world. When you look at marathons in places like London and Berlin and Chicago and Tokyo, that all came from the idea of a marathon running through a major city. Of course, Boston had been around for a while, but Boston had been running from the suburbs into the city. This is a marathon that touches all parts of New York City, and they really were the ones to bring it to life. So over the next 4 months, we're going to be telling their incredible story. So keep an eye out across all of our social media channels, on our website, at the Marathon Expo this year, in signage across all 5 boroughs, and on the race broadcast of this year's TCS New York City Marathon, because we're going to be talking about the Trailblazers all year long.
History takes the track this summer in New York City. Join us for the USATF Outdoor and Para National Championships, July 23rd through 26th at Icon Stadium in New York City, as the sport celebrates 150 years of outdoor championships. Watch America's best athletes compete for national titles and records at one of track and field's most iconic venues. Secure your tickets today at usatf.org/tickets. Again, that's usatf.org/tickets.
Speaking of the 50th anniversary of the five-borough New York City Marathon, when it ran through 5 boroughs for the first time in 1976, only 63 women crossed the finish line that year. In 2025, over 27,000 crossed the TCS New York City Marathon finish line in Central Park. So how did we get from 63 to 27,156 women running the New York City Marathon? Our guest today is one of the rare people who can really answer that story. Gordon Bakoulis, Coach Gordon to many of you, is a 5-time Olympic marathon trials qualifier who began running just 2 years after that game-changing five-borough marathon in 1976. She was a legend who came up in the sport just as women's distance running was really being invented around her. Gordon is also New York Roadrunners editorial director, which makes her the keeper of this organization's stories. And today, as she prepares to retire after an incredible 24-year run at New York Roadrunners, she's finally joined us here on Set the Pace to tell her own story. Gordon, I know you've been a pretty regular listener to Set the Pace. You've made sure that all of our stories were accurate all this time. So it's great to actually have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Rob. It's great to be here. Yeah, long-time listener. First time guest.
Long-time listener, first-time guest. Exactly. It's a great time to have you on. So thanks for joining us. Before we jump in, by the way, we're going to share a few numbers with our listeners. I'm going to tease them, and then they'll come out as we go through this conversation. So some numbers to keep in the back of your mind if you're listening: 468, 33, 239, 370, and 3,044. So we'll get through and to all of those numbers as we talk. But let's start, Gordon, about the marathon then and now. As you know, we're close to 60,000 runners now in the marathon, a drawing that the vast majority of people who enter lose when they try lots of different ways in, but it's such a hard thing to get into now, as you know. You started running as a high schooler in the late 70s, 2 years after the first five-borough race, when only 63 women finished, as I said before. What do you remember about being a woman in the sport of distance running back in those days?
Yeah, no, it was a different time. It was definitely a different era. I started running my senior year of high school. So in the fall of that year, that was 1978. And as you said, just 2 years after the first five-borough New York City Marathon. I honestly do not remember the first five-borough New York City Marathon. I was 15, and my dad actually had just started running, maybe about a year before that. He started running in late 1975. So I was kind of adjacent to that sort of first beginnings of the running boom, the 1970s running boom. I also remember 1972 when I was 11, Frank Shorter winning the Olympic marathon in Munich.
Yeah.
And, an American winner. He won just so triumphantly. He was so far ahead of the field. He made it look so effortless. So that caught a lot of people's attention, people within and outside the running world. But it didn't really cause the running boom to explode at the time. But it got people's attention. And then there was just this sort of groundswell of increased interest in running. And like I said, my dad, he was sort of typical of new runners at the time. He was not competitive. He didn't have any lofty aspirations. It was for him just, he was in his early 40s, kind of making some overall lifestyle changes for better health. He got running. Actually, he was in a 12-step program for recovery from alcoholism, and several of his friends in the program were runners, and they said, it's a really good way to healthy up your lifestyle, get away from your drinking buddies. And so that for him was the impetus to start running. And he ran the New York City Marathon twice, actually, in 1978, the year I started, and again in 1980. So, I was sort of adjacent to that early running boom culture. And most of his running buddies were men, but not all of them. There were a few women in his little running cohort, running community. So it wasn't odd to me to, be around women runners. But for me, yeah, it was again sort of a healthy lifestyle thing. I was 17. I had always done sports. I loved sports, but I wasn't any good at any sport. I was the typical, I loved to run up and down the soccer field, run up and down the lacrosse field, the field hockey field. But when it came to, the actual skills, I just didn't really have them. So, being good at sports wasn't my jam, although I loved sports. But
until you started running.
So I started running with a friend.
You found out.
And it was love at first step. It really was. So it was an interesting time for women's running. It was, the real pioneers. People call me a pioneer sometimes, but I feel like I just ran through the doors that the real pioneers of running, of women's running, opened for me. People like Catherine Switzer, Nina Cusick, Greta Weitz, Joan Benoit Samuelson. They had to fight blatant discrimination, misunderstanding, sexism, and just being told, no, you can't do this. And I never had to had to overcome those obstacles. The doors were open, and I simply ran through them. So it was great. And I didn't realize until many years later that there, of course, were a lot of inequities at the time. Women couldn't run the Olympic marathon. They couldn't even run the 10,000. When those doors had just been opened, and there were a lot of people who felt like women still had to prove themselves as runners.
Yeah.
But for me, it felt great. The doors were open.
Yeah.
It felt like we were an army rather than just a little sliver. And I loved it. I loved it right from the start.
Tell me about your running. So did you start out running the mile? Was that kind of the first event you really focused on? That's typical for
Yes.
high school athletes.
Yeah.
When did you realize, wow, I'm pretty good at this? Because my understanding is you made it all the way to the States that first year.
Yeah, I did pretty quickly. I ran with my friend, a friend in the neighborhood who had been on the track team and didn't want to do winter track. She wanted to just kind of stay in shape for spring track. So she coaxed me to get up early and run around the neighborhood a few mornings a week. Real slow, real easy, conversational, and I loved that. And then the following spring, when she went out for spring track, I was right there with her. I didn't want to play lacrosse anymore and, spend more time warming the bench than actually participating. So I went out for spring track, and pretty quickly. I wasn't a sprinter at all, and I knew that. But I ran like the 800, the mile, and the 2 mile. Because I couldn't run fast, but I could just run and run and run. And I did make it all the way to the state meet, and realized, oh wow, here's a sport that I'm good at. Too bad I didn't discover this earlier. But I'm always really grateful that I had that gentle introduction to running. Those few months, just like enjoying the camaraderie, enjoying being up early, exploring the neighborhood, chatting with my friend. We formed a really strong bond where the two of us are still great friends to this day. And, so I had that nice, gentle introduction, and then also the realization, oh, this is great. This is awesome. This is something I could be good at.
Yeah. And where did it go from there? I know you got kind of clocked in a couple different places, people seeing you running fast times in the mini 10K and some other events. When did you kind of get quote unquote discovered, if you will, as someone who could really run at a high level?
Yeah, it was funny. It was I went to a college, I went to University of Virginia, where there was a great running program, but because I had just started my senior year of high school, I didn't get recruited or anything, and I didn't really even consider running there. When I made friends with some of the women on the team, and I saw what they were doing, running 100 miles a week, and I was just like, no, that's not what I want to do in college anyway. So again, I was sort of adjacent to that, but not involved in that program. So through college, I just ran the way, any, sort of recreational runner would. And I also did a lot of other sports, to just stay fit and sane, and, take study breaks and stuff like that. And then I moved to the New York area when I graduated, moved back to this area. I'm from New Jersey, but moved into the city in 1983. And in 1984, I wanted to run a marathon. So what better marathon than New York, of course. As you were alluding to earlier, it was a lot easier to get into the marathon in those days. We did have by that point we had started with the lottery, but it was the odds were much, much, much better. So I applied and got in and ran the marathon for fun. I ran 3 hours and 40 minutes, which was, good, but definitely not, at all at the top competitive level. And loved it. I mean, all the things that we say about the New York City Marathon just absolutely worked their magic on me. It's just a stunning way to see the city. I'd been living in New York for, less than a year. I don't think I'd ever even been to Queens, never, certainly never run over the Verrazano Narrows Bridge or any of those bridges. And, just, it was amazing. It's like, wow, this is phenomenal. It was hard. I was definitely undertrained, and, didn't know all that really any of us know today about fueling and hydration and all those things. So, but it was great. It was a really great experience. Still didn't think about trying to run fast again, even though sort of in the back of my mind, it was like, yeah. I was like a state, qualifying runner back in high school. But the following spring, I just sort of started to test myself. I'd go run around the reservoir in Central Park to see if I could run faster today than I had run yesterday or last week or whatever. And I guess I got pretty fast because when the mini 10K rolled around, the women's mini 10K in June, I ran that, and I ran sub 40 minutes, 38 something, and met up with a friend afterwards who had gone to UVA and had run for the team there. And she said, yeah, I run for this team, Atalanta. It's a women's running team. You should come out to a workout. So I did. And again, like right away, found success. I was leading the workouts, and I started running, cut my time in the 10K really quickly. And so that was my reintroduction to competitive running. And it was great. Again, just success. And a lot of learning. We had a wonderful coach, Bob Glover, the legendary Bob Glover, who ran the New York Roadrunners. What was the precursor, the predecessor of our group training program for years. He had started it in the 70s, and he continued in that role until 2015. So he's a super legend, and he was a great coach, and a real believer in women's running, in equality for women. So I just stuck with that, and had some ups and downs, injuries, as we all do, and that sort of thing. But just his belief in women's running and his dedication to women's running, and then opening my eyes. I had no idea, how one got on an Olympic team, or really what adult women's post-collegiate running was all about. So that was my introduction.
Yeah, and then it went from that 1984 marathon at 3:40 to cut to a few years later at Grandma's, and quite a bit of improvement for you. So nearly an hour faster
Exactly.
in that marathon that qualified you for the Olympic trials. Take us to the moment you crossed that finish line in 1987, understanding what you did. I assume you knew the time. Did you know the time you had to
I
hit
did.
to qualify for the
The
Olympics
the
trials? Yep.
standard, I don't know if this is accurate, but I think it was like 2:51. The standards were a little more lenient back then. I mean, of course, pre-super shoes. I always,
Of
whenever I
course.
tell people what my PRs, lifetime PRs are, it's always, oh, and I did it all without super shoes, by the way. Yeah, but I think 2:51 is what it was. And again, I just didn't know anything about this at all, and I give Bob Glover all the credit in the world, plus the teammates that I had who had experience, who had run in the 84 trials. And I one, didn't know how it all worked, how you qualified for the Olympics and that sort of thing. And two, really had a limited understanding of how new this all was for women. As I'm sure 1984 was the first year that women's Olympic marathon was happened, and that was 1980. That was Los Angeles. Joan Benoit Samuelson, American, of course, won the gold medal, and I just didn't know that had all happened. Like just a couple of years before I got into the sport. And so Bob had to, educate me, and Bob and my teammates, okay, this is how it works. You go to a race that's sanctioned, and you run the time, and then, you can go run the Olympic trials. And then at the trials, the top 3 across the line, as long as they've hit the Olympic standard, go to the Olympics. It's like, oh, okay, that sounds cool. So Grandma's Marathon in 1987. I had tried to qualify at New York in 1986, but I developed an injury during training, the dreaded plantar fasciitis, and really, like, standing on the starting line the Verrazano, I was like, this isn't going to happen. My heel hurts a lot right now, and I'm not even running yet. So that is
That's
one
rough.
of
Yeah.
only 2 marathons in my career that I dropped out of, and I was devastated. And but again, Bob and my teammates just said, "Oh, you got plenty of time. Injuries heal." That was my first major injury, and I was like, "Oh, I'll never run again," as we all do. But I healed up fine, and then the following spring, 1987, and I had run half marathons in like close to 120. So I knew, the formula, double it and add 10 minutes. I should have a little bit of breathing room there. But Grandma's, I don't know if you've ever run that marathon. It just happened last weekend. It's
Not
a
yet.
wonderful, wonderful
Yeah.
race out in Duluth, Minnesota, along the shores of Lake Superior Flat. It can be very fast, depending on the weather. But if you have any kind of a tailwind, it's like Boston. If you have a tailwind, it's a tailwind the whole way. And we had a tailwind that year, and it was great. And I just remember Bob, several of us ran. So Bob came out to watch and cheer, and he was on the course at about mile 24. And he just said, not even like that loudly, very quietly, like, "You got this," as I went by. And it was just like the best feeling in the world. Like, yeah, I'm going to
Yeah.
qualify for the Olympic trials. So I think I ran, I'm sure I ran just over 246, so 246.0 something. Gave me a nice little buffer there. So yeah, that was that. I was off to the Olympic trials, which were in 1988 in Pittsburgh, and improved a lot there as well. Although, never in that race did I entertain thoughts of like, oh, I could make the Olympic team. It was
Yeah.
the winners, the top women entered in that race were significantly at a higher level than I was. But it kind of felt like
Gordon,
my
I think
Olympics, just going to
yeah.
something has the word Olympic in it. It's like, oh, that's good
I
enough for
think
me.
that's exactly right for
Yeah.
anybody who I mean, a lot of women, and men on the men's side, get there, and that's their big day. That's
agree.
their big moment. Only a few are going to make the actual Olympics,
Yeah.
but dozens get to have that day, which is one of the things I love about that format. What is most remarkable to me about you? I mean, there's a lot of remarkable things about you, but in terms of your running career, the longevity and the consistency that you were able to have over such a long period of time. Not one, not two, not three, not four,
Mhm.
5 Olympic trials.
Yeah.
5 cycles of that. You were able to come back again and again and again and meet that standard and get to that day. And so I have 2 questions for you. How did you do that? What was the secret to your
Mhm.
longevity? And then what was the year that you felt you maybe had a chance to actually make it? What was your
Mhm.
closest, or the year you felt you actually maybe could pull it off in terms of getting to the Olympics?
Yeah. Yeah. No, those are great questions. And I think they speak to just the system that we have in this country for choosing our Olympic teams. I think the trial system, you could debate it all day because there's pros and cons, but I think the biggest selling point for a trial system is it does create this aspirational environment where you really aspire to even make it to the trials, because you're right, it's not easy. And then you just have to show up on the day, and so that atmosphere on the start line of the trials, when you kind of know in your heart of hearts, she's here, she's here, she's here. I'm probably not going to make the team, but you could, in theory.
Yeah, that's right. Could have a good day. Other people have not such a good day, and
Exactly.
there you go.
Until the race is
Mhm.
actually run, you don't know how it's going to come out.
Yeah.
So that drew me in the first time. I'd never experienced anything like that, and fortunately, I had a really good day, which probably helped. I came in 17th in 1988 with a 237. And it was just intoxicating, the atmosphere, just the way the trials athletes are treated. We were all just treated at all the trials that I ran, the host committee and all the officials, volunteers and everything. You just felt so, so, so special. That was a motivation to keep trying to qualify every 4 years. And yeah, in terms of the longevity, I do think that I was lucky. I've been lucky over the years, but also just, again, I give Bob Glover just so much credit for how he coached, how he was very developmental, how he never got rattled, never let me get rattled, through injuries, through setbacks. It's just like, this is a long-term thing that you're doing. And, you can, connecting me to healer, people, medical people, and that injuries come and go, that that you have good patches and bad patches in your career, and you just you overcome them. You figure out ways to deal with setbacks and to keep going, and just inspiring that love of the sport. I think any coach that can do that, that's more valuable than, hey, I'm going to write you the greatest training program the world has ever seen. So,
Yeah.
and the team environment as well. Atalanta was a really, really wonderful program, a really great team of women. And I, just sort of by accident ended up on an all women's team, but I do speak I, very, very highly of women's only running teams, because I just think, that in atmosphere, especially in those days when, again, women weren't as, there weren't as many women competing. There were, not there weren't environments that catered specifically to women as competitive athletes, and I just
Yeah.
happened to be in a really, really good one. So, but yeah, and the longevity, I think, also had to do with um, just having a balanced lifestyle. I never was completely a professional elite runner where that was the only thing I did. I was either working full time or, having a lot of freelance. I've always been a writer and editor as my career, and always having a lot of freelance projects that sort of kept me balanced, so I wasn't just, sitting around between workouts, getting nervous about how I was going to do, 10 by 800 in 220 or whatever I was on the
Yeah.
docket for the
Yeah.
day. So I think those things made a big difference. But yeah,
Yeah.
it wasn't always easy. I think the hardest trials for me was in 2000, which was just 5 months after we had our second kid, my son Sam. I had him in September of '99, and then the trials were in February of 2000. So, I
Wow.
tempered my expectations as far as I didn't expect to do a really stellar time. Not only
Yeah.
because it's hard to come back from childbirth, it really, really is, and every woman is different, and every pregnancy is different. I had a pretty easy comeback from our first son, Joe, who was born in 1997. But you never know, and I was fortunate to have a relatively easy comeback after we had Sam as well. But that was, two kids age 2 and under. So there was also the time factor. I remember I had
Of course.
sort of set
The
up a
sleep
rule that,
factor.
like, all right, I'm only going to run if I can get in at least 30 minutes, because what's the point really of, going out and running for less than 30 minutes? And that went out the window almost immediately. Like, I had a lot of 27-minute runs. Oh, here's a 19-minute run. It's just like whatever you could fit in. 92 was the year that I came closest to making the team. I came in 8th. So, and as you know, top 3
Oh,
make
wow.
the team. So I was with the lead pack
Wow.
for a significant chunk of the race, and then it was
Incredible.
that classic sort of race of attrition, the last 5 miles. But
That would have been Barcelona.
that
if I'm
would
not
that would have
mistaken,
been
right?
Barcelona games. The trials that year were
Yeah.
in Houston, and it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
a great day.
Incredible.
But not
It's
good
great,
enough.
great history. Gordon, you talk so much about the impact that a great coach had on you.
Mhm.
When did you first decide you also wanted to coach?
Yeah. No, that was in the '90s. I stayed with Bob Glover and the Atalanta team through the early '90s, and then I had been doing some training stints out in Boulder, Colorado, where one of my sisters was living, and they had a program back in the day called, I think it was called the Boulder High Altitude Training Program. So I had done that a couple of times and connected there with a coach named Benji Durden. Benji had been an Olympian. He made the team in 1980, and that was, of course, the year of the boycott. So he didn't actually compete in the Olympic marathon, but he had made the team. And we connected several times over the years, and then on one of the stints, I decided to make the break from working with Atalanta and work remotely with Benji. So yeah, that was I forget what your question was, actually. Sorry.
just when you first decided you wanted to be a coach
Yes,
yourself and
yes,
start
yes,
coaching
yes.
over other
Yeah,
runners. Yeah.
yeah. And as
Hmm.
much success as I'd had with Bob, I was like, okay, there's other ways of coaching. There were, I really almost all of what I absorbed from Bob was working, but there were a few things that weren't working, and I just didn't really realize there were different ways of coaching, different coaching styles, different coaching philosophies. So that planted the seed, like, well, maybe this is something I can do someday.
Yeah.
And by the mid '90s, I became the founder of a team called Moving Comfort New York. Moving Comfort was a women's clothing company back in the day, that had been founded by two women in the '70s when there was like nothing, absolutely nothing for women to run in. Literally like jock straps, like made into running bras because the existing
Wow.
running. Yeah, you don't want to know. I'll just leave it at that. But the two women, I'm blanking on their names right now, founded Moving Comfort, and they sponsored a team that I ran with for years, just called Moving Comfort Racing Team. And then through me and the liaison to that, a man named Jeff Darman, who's been a long time involved with running in various capacities. We founded sort of a New York chapter of that called Moving Comfort New York, and I became the coach of that and did that for years and years. Our names changed over the years because Moving Comfort was eventually bought by Russell Athletics, so they weren't sponsoring women's running teams anymore. But we had so many different names. Athena was our name for a while, and Running
Mm.
Divas, and then we disbanded in 2012, not through any for due to anything negative. It was just everyone was
Hmm.
off having babies and getting involved in other things. So that team no longer
Yeah.
exists. But I coached it for 20 years. And then just as that was winding down, I knew Bob Glover was going to be retiring from New York Road, or his collaboration with New York Roadrunners as head of the running program. So I started coaching with group training in
Hmm.
2016, right at the end of 2015. So been doing
Yeah.
that ever since.
And I've had the opportunity to know you as a coach. I've done some group training sessions myself, and I'm wondering through that process, Gordon, you talked about different ways of coaching, different styles
Hmm.
of coaching. How did your style of coaching evolve? How do you think you grew as a coach,
Yeah.
and how would you describe your style of coaching now?
Yeah, that's a great question because it really has evolved. Um, I guess the short answer is just I've become more confident in my role as a coach, and just more realizing that the best thing a coach can do is just be confident in their athlete. I used to just get so wrapped up in, what if I don't write the perfect, it's like I was saying before, writing the perfect training program is kind of the easy part. And it's the part, honestly, that matters the least. As long as you're following basic rules of, hard days followed by easy days, allowing for recovery, long runs that build gradually, et cetera, et cetera, a little bit of tempo. So you get used to sustaining a high level, but not too high a level. You're pretty good. And a lot of coaches are good at that. And what it took me a longer time to develop was just the confidence internally in what I was doing to convey confidence, and imbue my athletes with the confidence they needed to succeed. And quite honestly, some of my athletes taught me more about how to do that than I feel like I taught them. So it was just a gradual process over the years of just being there, creating. Mostly what I do now is coach with group training. So it's coaching, groups of athletes rather than one-on-one, although I've done a lot of one-on-one over the years. Just creating an atmosphere that's welcoming, inclusive, just meets people where they are, non-judgmental, setting high standards like, okay, this is what we're going to do today. It's not going to be easy, but, here's how we're going to do it. But, wherever people are with their lives, they come, do the workout, and, that's all you can ask of them, is to just give it their best shot. So, I try to just, convey that positivity and that belief and that lack of judgment every single workout. It's always interesting at the beginning of a group training session. There's always new people, who may have never done a workout at all or never done one
Hmm.
since they had like a mean coach back in high school or something, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And they kind of have
Yeah.
this look in their eye, like, kind of wide-eyed. And then after the workout, they're just like, okay, yeah, this is fine. I can do this. This is
Yeah.
hard. It's not going to be something that, I can just sort of coast through every week or twice a week or whatever, but I can do this. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel that the people here believe in me, want me to be here, welcome me, include me, see me. And that just means everything, that in running
When
and
I
in life.
started working, yeah, and when I started working here 3.5 years ago, and I started coming to those group
Yeah,
training
I remember that well.
sessions, I hadn't been in a group running
Hmm.
situation, like an organized, coached workout since I had run cross country in high
Yeah.
school, right? So it had been a really long time of just running on my own. I'd run a couple of
Yeah.
marathons, but mostly training on my own through a static training plan that I would get in a magazine or something like that. And I just remember like, wow, what it what I felt I was getting from it, the improvement that I felt,
Hmm.
and just the accountability and like having somewhere to be and a workout that was planned. It really was game changing.
Yeah.
Like, talk to the people out there who are like I was, and that's a lot of runners, right? Who just, they just run on their own. And that's one of the beauties of running, is that you can do that. But the benefits that you can get from showing up at something like a group training, whether it's with us or with a club or whatever it might be. No, why?
Hmm.
Why put yourself through that
Yeah.
if if you're a runner and you aspire to get better?
Yes, you're right, Rob. You are very typical in that sense that, you have an athletic background, but it's been years, and a lot of people show up in exactly that situation. And I'll add, I think women more than men are likely to show up having had a negative experience with that earlier on. Maybe a situation that wasn't intended to be negative. No one was like deliberately mean to them, but just where they felt, maybe marginalized or, sort of second to the men's team or the men's program or whatever. And just to have them show up and be treated, with complete equality, with complete um, just acceptance, inclusion, I think really means everything. And yeah, for those people, we just which is the majority of new people to group training. We just
Yeah.
we just want them to have a really positive experience. We definitely want to share our knowledge and wisdom and our own experience. And we are very well trained. Most of us have become certified through USATF or Roadrunners Club of America, RRCA. So we know what we're doing. We're not just willy-nilly making up these programs and workouts that we don't know whether they're going to work or not. We know they work. They're very tested. But it's just that making it a positive experience, accepting them, seeing them, embracing them, and then creating a dynamic, by doing all those things, creating a dynamic within the workouts where they're lifting each other up. A lot of the runners are very social, as you know. There's the myth of the loneliness of the long distance runner has been shown many times to be a myth. We're incredibly
Mm-hmm.
social. And we foster that. There are times during the workouts where people can hang out and talk with each other, or even during the workouts, they can interact, or even if they're not saying anything, you're doing it together. You have that accountability, and that social connection, that I think is so important. We just celebrated 10 years of New York Roadrunners group training this year. So we've heard from a lot of people over the years, and we highlighted a few people in a blog post that we did recently, that they say they keep coming back for the community. They know what to do. They know how to go out and do a tempo run on if they had to on their own or whatever, but they
Yeah.
keep coming back for the community. So that's why we're
All
here.
right, Gordon. So, yeah. So at the top of the interview, I teased 5 different numbers.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go through
Okay.
each one of these, Gordon, and you tell me what this number represents in your career as a
Oh
runner
my
and with New
gosh.
York
This
Roadrunners.
is a
The
spot
first
quiz.
number, that's right. If you don't get it, I've got the
Okay.
answers. The first number is 468.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I actually know what this is. That is the number of New York Roadrunners races that I've done in like
That is correct.
40 years or whatever it's been. 30
That is
years.
correct. That is exactly right. Over 40 years, you've run 468
Yeah.
races, from the Legs Mini in May of 1986 to the the Citizens Queens 10K this past Saturday was number
That's
468.
bananas.
Still going strong. I can't wait for 500,
Okay, well,
Gordon. Let's go.
let
We're
me
going to
just
have a big
interject
cake
here.
for
I
that.
want to give my dear husband a plug. Alan Rubin has done 505. So not that we're competitive
Wow.
with each other. he's winning that particular little
He's
marriage
got you by a
rivalry.
few. All right. Well, we got to make sure we're all there for number 500 when you cross that
Okay.
finish line. That's going to be a big deal. All right. How about 33?
I don't know what that is. I'm sorry.
That is the number of times, Gordon, that you have run the mini 10K.
Oh, of course.
Your
Yes, 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 yes.
first-
Sorry. Yeah.
Yes,
right.
that's okay. No, we got you. The first was 1986, and the latest was just a few weeks
Yep.
ago. By the way, just a few weeks ago, Gordon Bakoulis still won her
I
age
did.
group. That's right. Still killing it.
On that
Unbelievable.
beastly hot day. I somehow, when I wanted to stop so many times.
Incredible.
But I finished
Incredible.
and won my age
You
group.
got just
Thank
adding
you.
some more hardware to that trophy
Indeed.
case at home. How about 239? I'll give you a hint. This is in that age group category.
know.
239.
So have I won my age group 239 times? That's crazy.
Correct. That is right.
How did you
You've
find
won
that
your age
out?
group.
You must know
Catherine
people in the scoring
Jones
team.
And our Catherine Jones, I think she knows people, and they came up with these
Oh,
numbers,
that's
I
so
think.
funny.
But our great
I
producer,
didn't know that
Catherine,
one.
came up with some of
The
these.
33, I should have
That's a-
gotten that one, but okay. 239.
That's
noted.
okay. That's incredible. Okay. How about this one? 370.
I don't know that one either. Sorry, Rob. I'm failing. I've
Same
already
ballpark.
failed this test.
This was a hard one. That's the number of times that you finished on the age group podium. So
oh, that's cool.
nearly 4 out of every 5 times you've
Yeah.
raced with Roadrunners, you finished on the podium
Wow.
in your age group.
in my age group. Wow. Okay.
Yes.
I like this.
That's
I like this. I'm
unbelievable.
going to hire you. You can write some press releases.
Hire
right?
Catherine. I'm not the one. But
Thank
these
you,
are incredible
Catherine.
numbers. How about this number? 1:14:03.
Oh, okay. That's a half marathon time. I think it's my
Mhm.
fastest half marathon in Central Park, and it was like a Central Park record. I don't know. I
It
need
is
some help. I know
your
it's a half marathon time, so
Fred
I get
Le-
partial credit.
Yep. You definitely do.
Okay.
It is your Fred LeBeau half marathon event record time,
Right. That's it.
which has stood since 1992.
Yeah. Yeah, and that race used to be in the summer, so that was run on a hot day. So I am really proud of that one. That was another one where I wanted to drop out many times. Just said, "Oh, keep going, keep going, keep going." I remember
That's
that.
incredible, by
Thank
the
you,
way.
Catherine.
I did not know that used to be in the summer.
Yes.
That must have been absolutely brutal
Yeah,
to run
it
that course in the
was-
summertime.
It was kind of crazy.
All right. And last but not least, 3,044.1.
That's probably, I'm going to guess, the number of miles that I've run in New York Roadrunners races.
You got it. You got it. That's exactly right. That's the total number of miles
Okay.
you have raced.
All right.
Not trained, raced in New York Roadrunners events,
right.
which, by the way, is roughly the distance from New York City to Shannon, Ireland. So you've run across the Atlantic Ocean.
Well, it'll go up
In
this weekend. I'm
races.
going to run the Pride Run on Saturday, and I don't know if I'll win my age group. I'll try. I always try. And I still love winning my age group. Not because I like beating my friends in the 65 to 69. I just like the competitiveness and the we encourage each other. We're all really good friends, and we all want each other to do well. But
It's so
that
amazing.
3,000 number, that'll go up because I'll run the 4 miles. I'll finish.
I
whether
think
win
just
the
about
age
all
group.
those numbers are going up, except for maybe that Fred LeBeau event record. That's
No,
going to stay the
I'm
same.
never
but I
going to
think
see
you've
that
got-
114 again ever. That is a fact. Oh my
But other
gosh.
than that, I think you've got upside in all of these, so it's pretty
That was
amazing.
fun.
And Gordon, I want to end just talking about your role at New York Roadrunners as our historian.
Hmm.
When I first got here, I remember I knew the organization a little bit. I'd been a member and a runner, but there was so much I didn't know about Roadrunners,
Hmm.
about the history, and how many times people would say, "Oh, you should ask Gordon that,"
Hmm.
or Gordon knows, or ask Gordon. And you're such a resource here, and a treasure trove of information about the history
Hmm.
of the organization. What has it meant for you to be in that role as really our historian, and keeping and telling the incredible history of
Yeah.
this organization?
Well, I mean, you just said it. It is an incredible history. So I think that's the first part of of it. It just, how can you not be interested in an organization that started with these 40 or so scrappy, they were all men back in the 50s, who just loved running. They didn't have any money, they weren't doing it for prestige, they loved to run, and they, believed in community, and they believed in inclusivity. There was never any like membership restrictions, that you had to be this fast, or you had to be this race or this religion or this gender, or, anything. It was for anybody who wanted to run. Um, 40 people or so back in 1958, and over 100,000 people today, and putting on the greatest races in the world in the best city in the world. How can you not find that compelling? So that's the main reason. It's just endlessly fascinating to me. If you ever want to, just not hear from me for like the next 4 hours, just sit me down with a bunch of old magazines, and I'll get our we used to have a magazine, as I'm sure you know, and we have it all on digitized, so you can look at them, in PDFs, and they're just amazing. Just the growth, the people, the personalities, the events, the programs, the mission, the reach, just the reach that we've developed all over the world, but yet the focus here in New York, and making New York a better place, in our partnerships with the city, with partners, all kinds of sponsorship relationships. It's just incredible. I'm getting chills. And really,
Yeah.
I know I'm like a true believer, but I just don't understand how anyone could not find that fascinating.
What
And
do you
and the
think is
people, of
the
course, I
thing?
mentioned. I knew
Yes.
some of them personally, especially Ted Corbett, Joe Kleinerman, and Fred Lebow, and Greta Weitz, the four of them, among many. We've had many, many incredible people that have been part of our organization, and
Yeah.
they were all
N-
extraordinary individuals. So, they
yeah.
taught me a lot, and I just feel like, to honor them, to honor their memory and their legacy, it's the least I can do to try to, make sure
Yeah.
those stories continue to be told.
Knowing the organization as well as you do, what is the thing about Roadrunners that you think is maybe the least understood?
Mm,
What do you think people don't know
mhm.
about New York Roadrunners that they should know?
Yeah. Like, what comes to mind is just the forward thinking, always looking ahead to the next thing. And I think that's somewhat well known, but there's just so many examples of that through the years. Always, it's more than just being visionary, which I think we are. We've always been visionary. We've always, even when we couldn't see exactly what the future was going to look like, we knew that we were it's like running. You're heading towards something rather than away from something. Um, from, knowing, we created this five-borough marathon, this amazing thing that, just it just sounded so extraordinary when we first came up with it. And it worked. We pulled it off in 1976, and it was supposed to be a one-off, to celebrate the bicentennial, but it was so successful and so compelling, that we have done it every year since. But right from that first moment, the leaders and everyone involved with the organization was trying to make it better, not just, making sure it's accurately measured and all that, which is, what all races do. But, how can it be better? How can we bring more international runners in? How can we, make the experience of getting to the start easier for the runners? How can we, let's broadcast it. Let's get it on a broadcast and, send it all over the world. And just that forward thinking attitude, not just with the marathon, but with everything that we do. And that willingness to try new things. We're in such a good place right now. I mean, that better than I do. Running is so successful. We're so successful, but still, we're just thinking, how can we make it better? How can we make it how our races more equitable, so more people can run our races in more places and have the experience and not feel like we're a club that they can't become a member of. So I think that's it, that I want to just, and I think we all do a great job of this, just making sure that story, that aspect of who we are, is woven into everything that we do.
Well, Gordon, congratulations on an amazing career here at New York Roadrunners. We're going to miss you in the office
I
for sure,
know.
but we really will. You've been such a steadying and a force here, and such a pillar of the organization. But I know we're going to keep seeing you at starting lines and finish lines, so you won't be far. But thank you for everything. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for sharing some of your journey
Oh,
today
thank
on
you
Set
so
the
much.
Pace.
Yeah, no, retirement is a bittersweet moment for sure. And it's I feel like I'm retiring to something rather than retiring from something, because I know I'll never fully leave New York Roadrunners and, all the things that all the relationships that I have here. But I'm excited to move on to the next thing. And thank you as well. I truly feel that the past few years here have been the best in my experience with the organization, and we're in a great place. So I appreciate
That means a lot to
your
me.
kind words, and I appreciate the organization and everything it's done and will continue to do. So thanks.
Thank you, Gordon.
Peloton has got something for whatever running mood you're in. Try instructor-led runs and walks that are built to fit into your routine, with classes that help you stay consistent, build speed, and be in the moment. Track your metrics, see your progress, and train smarter. We've got it all to help you reach your goals and stay on track. Peloton, the official digital fitness partner of New York Roadrunners.
This past Saturday was the Citizens Queens 10K. It was the fourth race in the 2026 New York Roadrunners five-borough series. We want to thank the more than 11,000 finishers we had out in Queens this past Saturday. The weather was beautiful. It was an absolutely gorgeous day to run. Now, we know that course was a little bit different. There were a lot of twists and turns on that course. The Citizens Queens 10K has always been a course with a lot of turns. We had to add even more for this year's edition because of construction that is going on in Flushing Meadows Park. So we heard from all the folks out there who got a little dizzy running that course, but a lot of people liked it too. I heard from a lot of folks that liked the technical nature of the course. So if you like turns, it was a great event for you. And obviously it was a beautiful day. So I know people had a lot of fun during the race, at the festival as well. Citizens and other partners come out, do such a great job creating a festive atmosphere around that race. So I hope everybody had a good time out in Queens. On the results side, the men's winner was Jaoud Al-Jazuli with a 31:07 from the United Mexican Runners of New York. On the women's side, Alana Levy, our friend from Brooklyn Track Club, was the winner, 34:55, and the non-binary winner, Kester Antequina, with a time of 37:51 from Front Runners New York. Speaking of front runners, we're so excited for this coming weekend, the Pride Run happening on Saturday. I will be there running that, one of my favorite races to run every year. And then, of course, right after that, we've got our annual Hope and Possibility race with our friends from Achilles. So that's going to be a big weekend of running in New York in Central Park coming up this weekend. And that does it for another episode of Set the Pace. We want to thank our guest today, NYRR legend Gordon Bakoulis. If you liked our episode today, make sure you hit that subscribe button, tell a friend, send us a comment so others can find this show as well. Good luck to everybody running this weekend. Enjoy the miles. We'll see you soon.